A patient once said to me, "Herr Doctor, I have been searching for happiness my entire existence." I asked him, "What were you doing at the precise moment you spoke those words?" He replied, "Simply conversing with you." I smiled knowingly. "Were you unhappy in that very instant?" He paused, suddenly aware. 9. Actually, I felt at peace. That is when the truth struck him like lightning. He had been so consumed with pursuing happiness, he failed to recognize that tranquility was already present. Your mind, my friend, is not your ally. It is a primitive apparatus, a relic from our ancestral past, treating every modern inconvenience as though it were a prowling predator. It evolved to ensure survival, not contentment, not fulfillment, not liberation. The thoughts you believe represent your true self are merely antiquated programs operating without conscious direction. But you, the genuine you are the observer witnessing these mental phenomena, and this recognition transforms everything. Before we explore these depths together, if these concepts are stirring something within you, consider subscribing and sharing in the comments what city and time zone you inhabit. I am genuinely fascinated to discover where these ideas are reaching souls across our world. Today, I shall demonstrate how you can become the master of your psyche rather than its helpless victim. You will discover why your thoughts feel so immediate and compelling, how your unconscious mind deceives you into unnecessary suffering, and most crucially, how to step back and observe it all with clinical clarity. I understand intimately what it means to feel imprisoned by one's own mental processes, that relentless internal chatter that never ceases, the voice that whispers you are inadequate, that catastrophe lurks around every corner, that you should have chosen differently in the past. You awaken already depleted by the conversations in your head. You retire replaying the same anxieties in endless cycles. It is like being confined in a chamber with someone who never stops speaking, and that someone is yourself. But here is what most people fail to comprehend. You are not actually trapped. You simply have not learned where to locate the key, and I shall show you precisely where to find it. I have dedicated my entire professional life to studying the human psyche, both its remarkable capabilities and its predictable patterns of dysfunction. I have analyzed thousands of cases, developed theories of consciousness that revolutionized our understanding of the mind, and worked with patients whose psychological structures were literally disintegrating before my eyes. But beyond the clinical work, I have learned these truths through my own journey, from mental captivity to psychological freedom. I am not here to impress you with academic credentials. I am here to share what actually liberates the human soul. Most individuals live their entire lives, never realizing they are not their thoughts. They become ensnared in mental loops, fighting battles that exist solely within their own consciousness. They spend their days wrestling with invisible enemies that feel completely real but are nothing more than patterns of neurological activity in their brain. But what if you could step back and observe your mind like you observe clouds passing overhead? What if you could find peace, not by altering your thoughts, but by transforming your relationship to them? The psychological pain you are experiencing at this very moment, that anxiety that prevents sleep, that melancholia that drains color from existence, that constant preoccupation with others' opinions of you, that persistent feeling that you are somehow failing at life, none of it originates from your external circumstances. It springs from believing the narrative your unconscious mind constructs about your circumstances. And here is the revelation that will astound you. You can rewrite that narrative at any moment you choose. You see, most people believe they must change their external reality to feel better internally. They think they require more wealth, superior relationships, different employment, physical perfection, greater achievements, external validation. But I shall reveal something that will save you years of pursuing things that will never truly satisfy you. The problem is not your life. The problem is the psychological lens through which you are viewing your life. And that lens? That is entirely within your conscious control. Consider this carefully. Two individuals can experience identical events and have completely different psychological reactions. One person encounters traffic delays and interprets this as evidence that the universe opposes them, that their day is ruined, that they are victims of forces beyond their influence. Another person encounters the same traffic and perceives it as an opportunity to listen to music, to practice patience, to simply be present with reality rather than fighting what cannot be altered. Same traffic, same delay, same external circumstances, but entirely different internal experiences. Why? Because they are employing different psychological frameworks, different narratives, different interpretations of what is occurring. And here is the beautiful truth. You possess the power to choose your framework. Allow me to tell you about the moment everything changed for me. It was a Tuesday evening in November, and I was sitting in my study after what had been one of the most psychologically challenging days of my career. I had lost a patient, someone with whom I had developed what we call a therapeutic alliance over months of analysis. Her name was Bertha, and she reminded me profoundly of my own mother. She possessed this remarkable ability to make everyone in her presence feel significant, even while battling what we now understand to be severe hysteria that we both knew would ultimately triumph. Bertha was 73 years old, a former governess who still carried sweets in her reticule for her grown grandchildren. She would inquire about my family during every session, remember details from our previous conversations, and somehow make me feel like I was the most important person in the world during our brief analytical encounters. She had this laugh that could illuminate an entire room, and even facing psychological dissolution, she maintained this incredible dignity and wit that left me in profound admiration. The day she succumbed, her family had gathered around her bed, and I was present when she drew her final breath. It was peaceful, dignified, surrounded by love, everything one could hope for in such a moment. But afterward, when I returned to my study to complete the case notes and process what had transpired, my mind began its familiar psychological assault. The voice in my consciousness was merciless. You should have recognized the signs earlier. You are not as competent as people believe. You failed her. You failed her family. Perhaps if you had employed different analytical techniques 6 months ago. Perhaps if you had consulted with that colleague in Vienna earlier. Perhaps if you had been more perceptive, more skilled, more careful, more intuitive. Perhaps if you had pursued that experimental treatment. Perhaps if you had been more aggressive with the therapeutic intervention. The psychological spiral descended deeper and deeper. I began questioning everything: my competence, my professional calling, whether I had any right to attempt healing people when I could not even heal Bertha. I began mentally reviewing every conversation we had shared, searching for signs I might have overlooked, decisions I could have made differently. The thoughts accelerated, each one more painful than the last. Other analysts would have saved her. You are a fraud. You have been deceiving everyone, including yourself. How many other patients have suffered because of your limitations? How many families have you disappointed? How many people have entrusted you with their psychological welfare when you are clearly inadequate to the task? It was like being simultaneously the accused, the prosecutor, and the judge in a psychological tribunal, and the verdict was always guilty. The evidence was always insufficient. The defense was always inadequate. And the sentence was always the same: you are not enough. But then something extraordinary occurred. In the midst of this mental tempest, I suddenly noticed something that transformed everything. There was a part of me that was observing all of this transpire. A part that remained calm, still, watching the chaos, like someone observing a theatrical performance from a comfortable seat in the audience. I realized there were two phenomena occurring simultaneously: the storm of thoughts and emotions, and this quiet awareness that was simply observing. It was like suddenly stepping outside during a thunderstorm and realizing you had been safe inside a house the entire time. The storm was real, the rain was real, the thunder was real, but I was not actually being drenched. I was protected by something much larger and more stable than the meteorological conditions. That is when it struck me like a bolt of analytical clarity. The voice that was berating me, that was not me. That was simply my mind performing what minds do, attempting to solve problems, avoid danger, make sense of tragedy, protect me from future pain by rehearsing past regrets. But the real me, the authentic me, I was the one observing it all occur. The genuine me was the awareness that could witness thoughts without being consumed by them, experience emotions without being destroyed by them, encounter pain without being defined by it. It was like suddenly realizing I had been watching a tragedy and mistaking it for reality. The performance was still continuing, the thoughts were still thinking themselves, the emotions were still flowing through. But I remembered I was merely the observer in the theater seat. I could choose to continue watching the disturbing scenes, or I could choose to step outside for fresh air. I could become lost in the drama, or I could remember it was simply a psychological production. Think about this carefully. Right now, as you listen to my voice, thoughts are undoubtedly arising in your consciousness. Perhaps you are thinking, "This makes sense," or "I am uncertain about this," or "What should I prepare for dinner?" or "I wonder if this will actually help me," or "This man speaks at great length," or "I must remember to contact my mother later." Now here is the question that will change your existence. Who is the one noticing those thoughts? Who is aware that thinking is occurring? That is you, the authentic you. Not the thoughts, the one observing the thoughts. Not the performance, the one in the audience seat. Not the weather, the sky in which the weather occurs. Not the waves, the ocean in which they rise and fall. This recognition transformed everything for me. I went from being the victim of my mind to being its compassionate observer, and that made all the difference in the world. Suddenly, the same thoughts that had been torturing me became merely phenomena to observe with scientific curiosity. The same emotions that had been overwhelming me became information to consider rather than commands to obey. Bertha's death remained heartbreaking. I still felt grief, still wished circumstances could have been different, still missed her laughter and her wisdom. But I no longer had to carry the additional burden of my mind's narrative about what her death signified about me as an analyst, as a person, as someone worthy of trust and respect. I could honor her memory and feel the natural sadness of loss without torturing myself with thoughts of professional inadequacy. But here is what I wish someone had taught me decades earlier. What I wish they had included in my medical training alongside all the anatomy and pathology and diagnostic procedures. Your mind has been deceiving you your entire existence. Not maliciously, it is actually attempting to help in its own confused manner, but it has been telling you three enormous falsehoods that keep you trapped in unnecessary psychological suffering. Understanding these deceptions will liberate you, but first, you must see them clearly, because they are so deeply embedded in how we conceptualize ourselves that we rarely question them. They are like the water a fish inhabits, so fundamental to our experience that they remain invisible. The first lie your mind tells you is this: you are what you think. Your mind has convinced you that every thought that arises is somehow you. It has made you believe that you are responsible for every random idea that floats through your consciousness, that you should be judged by every fleeting emotion that passes by, that your worth as a human being is determined by the quality and content of your mental activity. But consider this carefully. Where do thoughts originate? Did you decide to think your last thought? Did you plan it, design it, create it with intention and purpose? Did you sit down this morning and say, "Now I shall think about what I consumed for breakfast"? Or, "Let me deliberately worry about that thing I cannot control"? Of course not. Thoughts simply appear, like bubbles rising to the surface of water. They emerge from somewhere you cannot see, and they disappear to somewhere you cannot follow. They are not you any more than the sound of traffic outside your window is you. They are not you any more than the clouds passing overhead are the sky. They are not you any more than the waves on the ocean are the ocean itself. They are simply events occurring in the space of your awareness. You would not identify with the sounds around you. You do not say, "I am that automobile horn," or "I am that dog barking," or "I am that airplane flying overhead." So why do you identify with the thoughts in your head? The average person experiences approximately 60,000 thoughts per day. That is more than one thought per second during waking hours. If you were truly responsible for creating and managing all of those, when would you have time to do anything else? When would you sleep, eat, work, love, live? The truth is, most thoughts are simply recycled material, old fears, familiar worries, habitual patterns, playing on repeat. They are like a gramophone that has been left playing in the background, cycling through the same recordings over and over. You do not have to turn up the volume simply because it is making noise. You do not have to dance to every melody that plays. You do not have to believe every message that broadcasts. You can simply acknowledge that there is music playing and continue with your business. I had a patient named Greta, who perfectly illustrated this first deception. She was a brilliant seamstress, incredibly successful in her trade, but she was tormented by what she called her wicked thoughts. She would come to my office in tears, saying things like, "I am such a terrible person. I have these dreadful thoughts about people I care about. Sometimes I think cruel things about my own children. What kind of mother thinks her children are irritating? I must be broken, damaged, evil." Greta was convinced that having these thoughts made her a malevolent person. She was identifying so completely with every random mental event that she was living in constant shame and self-judgment. She was attempting to control her thoughts, to only think good thoughts, to be the kind of person who never had a critical or impatient or frustrated mental reaction to anything. It was exhausting her. She was expending more energy trying to manage her thoughts than she was actually living her life. She was like someone trying to control the weather by standing outside with an umbrella, becoming more and more frustrated that the rain kept falling despite her best efforts. When I helped her understand that thoughts are simply neurological activity, not character judgments, everything changed for her. She realized that having the thought, "My children are being annoying right now," did not make her a bad mother, any more than having the thought, "I could really enjoy some chocolate," made her a chocolate addict. Thoughts are simply phenomena that occur in minds. They are not moral statements about who you are. This understanding freed her to be human. She could acknowledge when her children were indeed being challenging without adding a layer of guilt about acknowledging it. She could notice critical thoughts without making them signify something terrible about her character. She could observe her mental activity with the same neutrality she might observe the weather. The second lie your mind tells you is that your thoughts are true. Your mind takes every random thought and presents it as breaking news from the Department of Absolute Reality. It says, "I am not adequate," and you believe it like it is a medical diagnosis confirmed by multiple specialists. It says, "Something terrible is going to happen," and you prepare for disaster, like you have received a weather report from the most reliable meteorologist in the world. It says, "Everyone is judging me," and you hide like you have been issued a warrant for your arrest. But here is the truth that will liberate you. Most of our thoughts are simply stories, old patterns repeating, fears from the past projecting into the future, interpretations based on incomplete information, assumptions based on limited perspective. They feel true because they are familiar. But familiar is not the same as accurate. Your mind is like an overzealous newspaper reporter who has been given very little actual information but still needs to file a story every few seconds. so it fills in the gaps with speculation, makes connections that may not exist, and presents everything with the same urgency, whether it is reporting on a genuine emergency or simply the fact that you are out of milk. Let me give you a detailed example. You enter a coffee house and see two colleagues sitting together. They are conversing quietly, and when they notice you, they cease their conversation and smile. Your mind immediately creates an elaborate narrative. They were discussing me. They probably think I am incompetent after that presentation last week. They are being artificially pleasant because they pity me. Everyone in the office probably knows I am struggling. I wager they are wondering how I even obtained this position. They probably think I am going to be dismissed soon. Within seconds, you feel hurt, embarrassed, paranoid, and want to leave. Your heart rate increases, your palms become moist, you start planning what you will say to defend yourself if anyone confronts you about your performance. You might even avoid those colleagues for the next few days, which then creates more awkwardness and seems to confirm your original suspicion that something was wrong. But what actually occurred? Two people stopped talking and smiled at you. That is it. That is the only factual information available. Everything else, the story about what they were discussing, their motivations, their opinions of you, their secret knowledge about your job security, that is all fiction, created by your mind in the span of about 3 seconds. But you believe the fiction more than the facts, because the mind is incredibly convincing when it tells stories. It does not present thoughts as possibilities, or maybes, or one interpretation among many. It presents them as reality, as truth, as things you need to take seriously and respond to immediately. I worked with a man named Heinrich, who was trapped by this second deception in a particularly painful way. He was convinced that his wife was going to abandon him, not because she had said anything about leaving, not because their relationship was particularly troubled, but because his mind kept producing thoughts about abandonment and rejection. She was quiet during dinner last evening, he would tell me. She must be planning her exit strategy. When she said she was tired and retired early, she was probably just avoiding me because she has fallen out of love. When she did not respond to my message immediately this morning, she was probably consulting with a lawyer. When she said we need to budget more carefully, she was probably preparing to divide our assets. Heinrich was living in a completely different reality than his wife. She was thinking about normal life matters, work, stress, family obligations, household management, while he was constructing an elaborate narrative about the end of their marriage based on the most ordinary interactions. The tragic part was that his behavior, driven by these unfounded fears, was actually creating problems in their relationship. He became clingy, suspicious, constantly seeking reassurance. He would analyze every word she said for hidden meaning, every facial expression for signs of dissatisfaction. He turned normal conversations into interrogations and simple interactions into tests of her love. When he learned to recognize that thoughts are not facts, that his mind was simply telling stories based on old wounds and fears, rather than current reality, he was able to step back and see his wife clearly for the first time in months. She was not planning to leave, she was simply being a normal person, living a normal life. His thoughts about abandonment were just thoughts, not prophecies or insights or reliable information about the future. This brings us to the third deception, which might be the most damaging of all, that you must act on every thought that arises. Your mind whispers, "Send that angry letter," and you reach for your pen. It says, "You cannot handle this challenge," and you avoid the opportunity. It screams, "Worry about everything that could go wrong," and you spend your day rehearsing disasters that will probably never happen. It suggests you should check your former lover's whereabouts, and you find yourself making inquiries that make you feel terrible. But you do not have to obey every thought, any more than you have to obey every advertisement in the newspaper. Just because a thought appears does not mean it deserves your attention, your energy, or your action. Thoughts are like suggestions from an overzealous assistant, sometimes helpful, often irrelevant, occasionally completely counterproductive. Think about it. If someone followed you around all day making random suggestions, you should eat cake for breakfast, you should quit your job, you should worry about that thing that might happen next year, you should assume everyone dislikes you, you should check your correspondence again, you should compare yourself to that person in the magazine, you would probably tell them to be quiet and leave you alone. But when your mind makes these same suggestions, you often treat them as commands you are obligated to follow. I had a patient named Clara, who was completely enslaved by this third deception. She was what you might call a thought obeyer. Every mental suggestion, no matter how small or illogical, felt like something she had to act on immediately. If her mind said, check your correspondence, she checked her correspondence, even if she had just looked at it 30 seconds earlier. If it said, worry about your daughter's safety, she would contact her adult daughter multiple times a day to ensure she was well. If it suggested, perhaps you have consumption, she would spend hours researching symptoms and make unnecessary physician appointments. If it whispered, you should clean the house, she would drop whatever she was doing and start cleaning. Even if she was exhausted and had more important matters to attend to, Clara was living her entire life in reaction to random mental activity. She had no sense of choice, no ability to prioritize, no peace. She was like a marionette, being controlled by an invisible puppeteer, except the puppeteer was her own mind, and she did not realize she could cut the string. When she learned that thoughts are simply mental events, not marching orders, her life transformed completely. She discovered she could have the thought, I should worry about everything, and choose not to worry. She could have the thought, I need to check my correspondence, and decide to finish what she was doing first. She could have the thought, something bad might happen, and respond with, that is an interesting thought, but I am going to focus on what is actually happening right now. For the first time in years, she felt like she was driving her own life instead of being driven by it. Once I understood these three deceptions, I started to see them everywhere. In my patients, in my friends, in my family, in myself. We are all walking around believing we are our thoughts, that our thoughts are true, and that we have no choice but to follow them wherever they lead. It is like being hypnotized by our own minds, trapped in a trance we do not even realize we are in. But here is the beautiful thing: you can awaken from this hypnosis anytime you want, and I am going to show you exactly how. Let me share another story that illustrates this perfectly. I had a patient named Franz, a successful merchant who came to me feeling completely trapped by his own success. He had everything he thought he wanted: wealth, recognition, a beautiful family, respect from his peers, but he could not shake the feeling that he was living someone else's life. Every day I awaken, and the voice in my head starts immediately, he told me during our first session. His hands were trembling slightly as he spoke, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. Before my feet even touched the floor, it is already going. You are behind schedule. You are not doing enough. Everyone expects more from you. You are going to disappoint people. You should be further along by now. Your competitors are gaining on you. You are not as intelligent as people think. What if they discover you are just making it up as you go along? Franz described what so many high achievers experience: being at war with their own minds. The same drive and ambition that had made him successful had also become a prison. His mind had learned to motivate him through fear and criticism, and now he could not turn it off. By the time I arrive at my business, I am already exhausted from arguing with myself, he continued. I spend all day trying to prove to that voice that I am good enough, smart enough, working hard enough, but nothing is ever sufficient. I close a big transaction, and the voice says, that was luck, you will never repeat it. I get praised by my business partner, and the voice says, if he really knew you, he would not be impressed. I make more money than I ever dreamed of. And the voice says, it will not last. You will lose it all, because you do not deserve it. Franz told me about lying awake at 3 in the morning, his mind churning through everything he had to do, everything he had done wrong, everything that could go wrong. He described the constant feeling that he was performing his life rather than living it, always on stage, always being judged by an audience that was never satisfied. I have everything I ever wanted, he said, his voice cracking slightly. But I feel like I am drowning in my own head. I cannot turn it off. I cannot find peace anywhere. My wife says I am always somewhere else, even when I am physically present. My children are growing up and I am missing it because I am so caught up in whatever crisis my mind is manufacturing. I am successful on paper, but miserable in reality. I asked him the same question. Asked you earlier. You said the voice in your head is talking. Who is listening to it? He looked at me like I had just asked him to solve the mysteries of the universe. What do you mean? You told me there is a voice in your head that starts talking the moment you wake up. If there is a voice talking, someone must be hearing it. Who is that? He sat quietly for a moment, really considering it. I could see something shifting in his eyes, like a light slowly turning on in a dark room. Then his eyebrows raised with genuine surprise. I am the one listening to it. Exactly. So if you can hear the voice, you must be separate from it. You cannot be both the speaker and the listener simultaneously. You are not the voice, you are the one who hears it. That simple question began to crack open everything for Franz. It was like showing someone who thought they were trapped in a locked room that the door had been open the whole time. Over the following weeks, instead of fighting with his thoughts or believing them automatically, he started to simply notice them with curiosity. Oh, there is that "you are not good enough" thought again. Look at that, my mind is rehearsing tomorrow's presentation for the 15th time today. Is it not interesting how my brain always jumps to worst-case scenarios when I have a big meeting coming up? He began to relate to his thoughts the way you might relate to an overprotective parent, sometimes annoying, often repetitive, but ultimately just trying to keep you safe in the only way it knows how. He stopped taking every thought so personally and started recognizing them as just patterns his mind had developed over years of trying to help him succeed. The transformation was remarkable to witness. The same thoughts were still there. His mind did not suddenly become zen and peaceful, but they had lost their power over him. They became background noise instead of breaking news. He was no longer their prisoner. He had become their compassionate witness. It is the strangest thing, he told me months later, looking more relaxed than I had ever seen him. I am the same person with the same mind, but everything feels different. The voice in my head still chatters away, probably always will, but it does not run my life anymore. It is like I used to live in a tiny, cramped room with no windows, and now I realize I actually live in a palace with beautiful views. The room is still there. I can visit it when I need to problem solve or plan. But it is just one small part of this much bigger, more beautiful space. Franz had discovered what I want you to discover. You are not the tiny room of your thinking mind. You are the vast palace of awareness itself. The thoughts are still there, but you have found the space, the awareness that was always there, waiting for you to come home to it. But Franz's transformation did not happen overnight, and it did not happen just through understanding these concepts intellectually. It happened through practice, through gradually building the muscle of awareness, through repeatedly choosing to step back from the mental drama and remember who he really was. This is what I want you to understand at the deepest level. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that observes them. You are not the weather, you are the sky. Storms may pass through, but they do not define you. They do not control you. They do not diminish you. They are just temporary visitors, in the vast, unchanging space of your being. Now, you might be thinking, this sounds beautiful, Herr Freud, but how do I actually do this? How do I become this observer you are talking about? I have been identified with my thoughts for so long, I do not even know where to begin. And what if my problems are more serious than just having too many thoughts? What if I have real anxiety, real melancholia, real trauma? Let me be clear about something important. I am not suggesting that mental health conditions are not real, or that you can just think your way out of clinical melancholia or severe anxiety. What I am sharing with you is a fundamental shift in perspective that can be helpful for anyone, regardless of their psychological condition. Whether you are dealing with everyday stress or clinical conditions, learning to observe your thoughts rather than being controlled by them is a valuable skill. Let me show you exactly how to start. I am going to give you 3 simple practices that will begin to shift you from being the victim of your thoughts to being their compassionate witness. These are not complicated analytical techniques or esoteric therapeutic practices. They are simple, practical tools that you can start using immediately. The first practice is what I call the 3-second pause. It is incredibly simple, but remarkably powerful. The next time you notice you are caught up in a storm of thinking, perhaps you are worried about something, angry about something, replaying an old conversation, or just spinning in familiar mental loops, try this. Notice what is happening. Take 3 slow, deep breaths. Then consciously choose your next response. Notice. Breathe. Choose. That is it. But do not underestimate the power of these 3 seconds. In that brief pause, you step out of automatic mode and into conscious choice. You move from being the victim of your mental weather to being the sky that contains it all. You remember that you have options, that you are not just a prisoner of whatever thoughts happen to be running through your head. Let me give you a concrete example that most people can relate to. Let us say you are stuck in traffic and your mind starts going mad with its usual traffic commentary. This is terrible. I am going to be late. Why does this always happen to me? I should have left earlier. What if I miss my appointment? People are going to think I am unreliable. This city's traffic is impossible. Why did I not take the other route? I hate this commute. My life is so stressful. Nothing ever goes smoothly. The old you, the you that is identified with your thoughts, would get swept away by this story. Feeling your stress levels rise, your jaw clench, your shoulders tense, your whole body preparing for battle as if being late to one appointment was going to ruin your entire existence. You would arrive at your destination already exhausted and irritated, carrying that negative energy into whatever you were supposed to do next, possibly affecting your performance and your interactions with other people. But the new you, the aware you, catches this mental spiral and applies the 3-second pause. You notice, oh, I am having those traffic is ruining my life thoughts again. My mind is catastrophizing about being 5 minutes late. Look at how my body is tensing up in response to this story my brain is telling. You take 3 deep breaths, feeling your body soften slightly with each exhale, remembering that you are not actually in danger just because you are moving slowly in your carriage. Then you consciously choose your response. This is just traffic. It is not a personal attack on me by the universe. It is not evidence that my life is falling apart. I can use this time to listen to music, practice breathing, think about someone I love, or simply be present with what is actually happening right now, instead of the story my mind is telling about what is happening. Same traffic jam, completely different experience. Same external situation, but you have changed the lens through which you are viewing it. You have remembered that you are not the victim of circumstances. You are the one who chooses how to interpret and respond to circumstances. That is the power of the pause. It creates space between stimulus and response, between what happens and what you do about what happens. And in that space, you find your freedom. The second practice is becoming what I call the friendly observer. Instead of judging your thoughts or trying to push them away, which never works anyway, and usually makes them stronger, treat them with the gentle curiosity of a scientist studying something interesting. When a thought appears, instead of "I should not be thinking this," or "this thought is stupid," or "why can I not stop worrying?" try, "Is it not interesting? My mind is concerned about the future right now." Or, "Look at that. My brain is replaying yesterday's conversation again." Or, "How curious that my mind keeps going to worst-case scenarios." This shift from judgment to curiosity changes everything. You stop fighting with your thoughts and start learning from them. You realize they are just patterns, habits your mind has developed over time to try to keep you safe. And like any habit, they can be observed, understood, and gradually changed. Think of it this way. If you saw a small child having a tantrum, you would not get angry at them or try to force them to stop crying. You would recognize they are overwhelmed and probably need some comfort and understanding. Your thoughts are often like that child. They are just trying to get your attention because they are worried about something. When you respond with kindness instead of resistance, they naturally begin to settle. I had a patient named Bertha who was plagued by anxious thoughts about her health. Every small ache or pain would trigger a cascade of worry. What if this headache is a brain tumor? What if this chest tightness is a heart condition? What if I am sick and do not know it? What if the doctors miss something important? What if I die young like my father did? She was spending hours every day researching medical conditions, convinced she had various terrible diseases, making unnecessary physician appointments, getting expensive examinations that always came back normal. Her family was frustrated with her, telling her she was being irrational, that she needed to just stop worrying. But the more they dismissed her fears, the more alone and mad she felt, which actually made the anxiety worse. When she learned to be the friendly observer, everything changed. Instead of getting caught up in the anxiety or trying to suppress it, she would notice, "Oh, there is my health anxiety again. How interesting that my mind goes straight to the worst possible scenario when I feel any physical sensation. I see you, anxiety. I know you are trying to keep me safe. But right now, in this moment, I am actually well." This gentle approach worked far better than all her previous attempts to stop the anxious thoughts. By acknowledging them with kindness instead of fighting them, they gradually lost their intensity and frequency. She was not dismissing her concerns entirely. If she had genuine symptoms, she would still see a physician, but she stopped letting every minor physical sensation send her into a panic spiral. The third practice is the daily reset. Every morning, before you get out of bed, before you check your correspondence, before you dive into the day's activities, take 30 seconds to remind yourself, "I am not my thoughts today. I am the awareness that observes them. Today I will practice being the sky, not the weather." And every evening, before you go to sleep, spend 2 minutes reflecting on your day, not judging yourself, not making a list of what you did wrong, but simply acknowledging moments when you caught yourself being the observer instead of the victim. I noticed when I started spiraling about that work presentation, and I paused. I caught myself getting lost in that old story about not being adequate, and I stepped back. I felt anxiety about money, and instead of getting consumed by it, I watched it like a cloud passing by. Celebrate these victories, no matter how small they seem. Each moment of awareness is like a ray of sunlight breaking through storm clouds. The more you notice these moments, the more they begin to multiply. You are building a new muscle here, the muscle of awareness. And like any muscle in your body, it gets stronger with practice. At first, you might only remember to pause once a day. That is not just acceptable, that is perfect. Progress, not perfection. Then perhaps twice. Then perhaps you catch yourself in the middle of a mental storm and remember to step back and observe. Then perhaps you start noticing thoughts as they arise instead of after you have been carried away by them for 20 minutes. Each time, you are claiming a little more of your freedom. Each moment of awareness is a step toward the peace and clarity that is your psychological birthright. Here is something crucial I want you to remember. This is not about never having difficult thoughts or emotions. It is not about becoming some kind of stoic automaton who never feels anything challenging. It is not about positive thinking or pretending everything is satisfactory when it is not. It is about changing your relationship with whatever arises in your mind and heart. When sadness comes, and it will come, because sadness is part of being human, you do not have to become sad. You can notice sadness moving through you like weather moving through the sky. When anger arises, you do not have to become the anger. You can observe anger as a temporary visitor with something to communicate to you. When fear shows up, you do not have to become afraid. You can witness fear as just another pattern in the mind, usually trying to protect you from some imagined future danger. You remain you, the aware, loving, peaceful, you that exists underneath all the mental weather. The you that was there when you were 5 years old, filled with wonder and curiosity. The you that will be there when you are 95, still aware, still watching, still free. Let me tell you more about Bertha, the patient I mentioned earlier whose death sent me into that spiral of self-recrimination. After I learned to be the observer of my thoughts instead of their victim, I realized something beautiful about that difficult time. The pain I felt when she died, that was love. The grief, the sense of loss, the wish that things could have been different, that was my heart breaking open in the face of losing someone I cared about. But the voice that told me I was a failure, that I should have done more, that I was not adequate, that was not love, that was just my mind trying to solve an unsolvable problem, trying to prevent future pain by beating me up about the past. When I learned to separate the authentic grief from the mental story about the grief, everything changed. I could honor Bertha's memory and feel the natural sadness of loss without torturing myself with thoughts of inadequacy. I could learn from the experience without drowning in regret. I could let my heart break open without letting my mind tear me apart. This is what becomes possible when you understand the difference between you and your thoughts. You can feel deeply without being destroyed by your feelings. You can experience pain without adding unnecessary suffering on top of it. You can be human fully, authentically human, without being at war with your humanity. Let me share another story that illustrates how profound this shift can be. I worked with a woman named Anna, who had been dealing with what we now call melancholia for most of her adult life. She had tried various treatments, consultations with other physicians, reading every psychological text she could find, everything she could think of to feel better. Some approaches helped temporarily, but nothing seemed to create lasting change. "I feel like I am drowning," she told me during our first consultation. "Every morning I awaken, and there is this heavy feeling in my chest, like someone placed a weight on my heart while I was sleeping. The thoughts start immediately. Another day of feeling miserable. Nothing will change. You are broken. You will never feel normal. Everyone else can handle life, but you cannot. You are weak. You are pathetic." Anna had become so identified with her melancholic thoughts that she could not imagine who she would be without them. Melancholia was not something she had, it was who she was. The thoughts were not just thoughts, they were truth, reality, facts about her life and her future. "I have been melancholic for so long," she said. "I do not even remember what it feels like to be normal. Sometimes, I wonder if this is just who I am. If some people are meant to be happy, and others, like me, are meant to struggle." But as we worked together, Anna began to discover something remarkable. When she learned to step back and observe her thoughts, instead of believing them automatically, she realized that underneath the melancholia, underneath the negative thoughts, there was something else. There was an awareness that remained calm even when her mind was agitated, loving even when her thoughts were critical, peaceful even when her emotions were turbulent. It is the strangest thing, she told me after several weeks of practice. The melancholic thoughts are still there sometimes, but they do not feel like me anymore. It is like there is this deeper part of me that is watching the melancholia happen, but is not melancholic itself. Does that make sense? It made perfect sense. Anna was discovering what you are going to discover. That you are not your mental and emotional states. You are the awareness in which they arise and pass away. This does not mean her melancholia disappeared overnight, but her relationship to it changed completely. Instead of being the victim of melancholia, she became its compassionate observer. Instead of fighting it or running from it, she learned to be present with it, without being consumed by it. I still have difficult days, she explained months later. But even on those days, there is this part of me that knows it is temporary. There is this space inside me that melancholia cannot touch. And when I rest in that space, even the hardest emotions become manageable. Anna had found what I am inviting you to find. The space within you that is larger than any emotion, any thought, any circumstance. The space that is your true home. Now, you might be wondering about the practical implications of all this. How does this understanding help you in your daily life? How do you apply this wisdom when you are dealing with real challenges, real problems, real responsibilities? Let me tell you about Wilhelm, a single father who came to me feeling completely overwhelmed by the demands of his existence. He was raising 2 young children on his own after his wife departed, working multiple jobs to make ends meet, and feeling like he was failing at everything. I cannot keep up, he told me, exhaustion written across every line of his face. My mind never stops. It is always telling me about everything I am doing wrong, everything I am not handling well enough, everything that could go wrong. I wake up already behind. I go to bed feeling guilty about all the things I did not accomplish. My children deserve better than this stressed-out, anxious version of me. Wilhelm's mind had become his worst enemy. It was constantly comparing him to other parents, judging his choices, predicting disaster, and making him feel inadequate. The irony was that he was actually doing an incredible job under extremely difficult circumstances, but his thoughts were preventing him from seeing that. When Wilhelm learned to observe his thoughts instead of believing them, his entire parenting experience transformed. He realized that most of his stress was not coming from his actual circumstances, it was coming from his thoughts about his circumstances. I still have the same challenges, he told me later, but I am not carrying the extra burden of all that mental commentary about how terrible everything is. When my 4-year-old has a tantrum, I can just deal with the tantrum, instead of also dealing with the voice in my head telling me I am a bad father for not preventing it. Wilhelm discovered that when you are not at war with your thoughts, you have so much more energy available for what is actually happening in your life. When you are not consumed by mental stories about how things should be different, you can respond to how things actually are with clarity and wisdom. This brings me to something crucial I want you to understand. This work is not about checking out of life or becoming passive or indifferent to your circumstances. It is about becoming more present, more responsive, more effective in dealing with whatever life brings you. When you are identified with your thoughts, you are constantly living in the past or the future. You are replaying what happened yesterday or rehearsing what might happen tomorrow. You miss what is actually happening right now, which is the only place where real life occurs, the only place where you can actually take effective action. But when you learn to be the observer of your thoughts, you become incredibly present. You can see situations more clearly because you are not looking at them through the filter of old fears and familiar stories. You can respond more wisely because you are not reacting from old patterns and automatic habits. I want to share with you one of the most profound examples of this that I have ever witnessed. I worked with a man named Gustav, who had been struggling with anger issues for most of his adult life. He had damaged relationships, lost employment opportunities, and hurt people he loved because he could not control his temper. It happened so rapidly, he told me. 1 second I am fine, and the next second I am exploding. By the time I realize what is happening, it is too late. The damage is done. I have said things I cannot take back, done things I regret. I hate who I become when I am angry. Gustav felt like a victim of his own emotions. He was convinced that anger was just part of his character, that he was naturally hot-tempered, that some people were just constituted to be more aggressive than others. But when he learned to create space between stimulus and response, everything changed. He discovered that anger does not just appear out of nowhere. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It starts with thoughts, builds with more thoughts, and explodes when those thoughts reach a critical mass. Now I can catch it early, he explained to me months later. I feel the first spark of irritation, and instead of feeding it with thoughts about how unfair everything is, I pause. I notice, oh, anger is starting to arise. I take a few breaths. I remember that I have a choice about what to do next. Gustav learned that he was not the anger. He was the one who could observe anger arising. And from that place of observation, he could choose how to respond instead of being carried away by the emotional storm. This transformation affected every area of his life. His relationships improved dramatically. His work performance increased because he was not constantly dealing with the aftermath of angry outbursts. His children began to trust him again because they knew he was not going to explode unpredictably. I still feel anger sometimes, Gustav told me. I am human, but now I feel it without becoming it. It is like the difference between being caught in a storm and watching a storm from inside a safe house. This is the practical power of understanding that you are not your thoughts and emotions. You do not become emotionally numb or spiritually detached. You become more responsive and less reactive. You become someone who can feel deeply without being destroyed by feelings, someone who can think clearly without being controlled by thoughts. But let me address something important here. You might be thinking, Herr Freud, this all sounds magnificent in theory, but my mind is really loud. My thoughts are really persistent. My emotions are really intense. What if this does not work for someone like me? I understand that concern because I have felt it myself, and I have worked with people whose mental activity is so intense it feels overwhelming. Some people have what I call loud minds. Their thoughts come fast and frequent. Their emotions run deep and strong. If that describes you, please know that this understanding is especially important for you, not less important. Let me tell you about Greta, who came to me saying, "My mind never shuts up, ever. From the moment I wake up until the moment I fall asleep. It is constant chatter, worries, plans, judgments, memories, fantasies. It is like having a brass band playing at full volume in my head 24 hours a day." Greta was convinced that she was somehow defective, that other people had quiet, peaceful minds, while hers was broken. She had tried various relaxation techniques, but could not sit still for more than 30 seconds. She had tried positive thinking, but could not maintain optimistic thoughts for more than a few minutes before the negative ones returned. I have read about people who experience inner peace and silence, she told me, but I honestly do not think that is possible for someone like me. My brain just does not work that way. But Greta was making a common mistake. She was trying to quiet her mind, instead of learning to relate to it differently. She was trying to stop the brass band, instead of realizing she did not have to dance to every song. When Greta learned that she could observe her mental activity without being controlled by it, everything changed. She did not need her mind to become quiet. She needed to find the quiet space from which she could watch her mind being active. It is like I discovered I have a soundproof chamber inside my head, she explained later. The band is still playing, probably always will be, but now I know I can step into this quiet space anytime I want. The noise does not disappear, but it stops bothering me, because I remember I am not the noise, I am the one who can hear it. This is crucial to understand. You do not need to fix your mind, or make it perfect, or get it to behave the way you think it should. You just need to remember that you are not your mind. You are the one who observes your mind. Think of it this way. If you are sitting beside a busy thoroughfare, you do not need to stop all the carriages from passing by to find peace. You just need to remember that you are not one of the carriages. You are the one sitting peacefully beside the road, watching the traffic pass. Your thoughts are like that traffic. They are going to keep moving, and that is perfectly fine. You do not need to control the traffic. You just need to remember that you are not stuck in one of the carriages. Now, let me share with you something that might surprise you. The louder your mind, the greater your potential for peace. People with very active minds often make the most dramatic transformations when they discover this understanding. Because the contrast is so stark, when someone who has been tormented by mental chatter discovers the quiet space of awareness, it is like stepping out of a noisy factory into a peaceful garden. I worked with a brilliant professor named Dr. Zimmerman, who had one of the most active minds I had ever encountered. His thoughts moved at lightning speed, constantly analyzing, calculating, planning, problem-solving. He was incredibly successful in his field, but he was also incredibly anxious and exhausted. My mind is like a calculating machine that someone forgot to install an off switch on, he told me. It is always running, always processing, always working on something. I cannot relax, because there is always another problem to solve, another lecture to plan, another scenario to consider. Dr. Zimmerman was convinced that his busy mind was just the price he had to pay for being intelligent and successful. He thought that if he turned down the mental volume, he would lose his edge, become less capable, less productive. But when he learned to step back and observe his mental activity, instead of being consumed by it, something remarkable happened. His thinking actually became clearer and more focused. When he was not caught up in every thought, he could choose which thoughts deserved his attention. When he was not controlled by his mental activity, he could direct it more effectively. It is paradoxical, he told me months later. By caring less about my thoughts, I actually think better. By not being so attached to my mental processes, I can use them more skillfully. It is like the difference between being dragged by a wild horse and riding a trained horse. This is one of the beautiful ironies of this work. When you stop trying so hard to control your mind, you actually gain more influence over it. When you stop fighting with your thoughts, they naturally become less intrusive. When you stop being afraid of your emotions, they move through you more easily. But here is what I really want you to understand. This is not about achieving some perfect state where you never have difficult thoughts or challenging emotions. That is not the goal, and it is not realistic. The goal is to change your relationship with whatever arises in your consciousness. You might still have anxious thoughts, but you will not be as frightened by them. You might still feel sad sometimes, but you will not be overwhelmed by sadness. You might still get angry occasionally, but you will not be controlled by anger. You might still worry about things, but you will not be consumed by worry. You will remain human fully, authentically human, but you will be a human who knows they are more than their humanity. You will be someone who can experience the full range of human thoughts and emotions without losing themselves in them. Let me tell you about the transformation I witnessed in myself over the years as I learned to live this understanding. I did not become some enlightened sage who never struggles or never has difficult moments. I still feel grief when I lose patience. I still feel frustrated when things do not go as planned. I still feel worried sometimes about my family, my work, my future. But my relationship to these experiences has changed completely. I no longer fight with them or try to escape from them. I do not add a second layer of suffering by judging myself for having them. I can feel sad without becoming a sad person. I can feel worried without becoming a worried person. I can experience difficulty without losing my sense of peace. This is the freedom I am offering you. Not freedom from being human, but freedom within being human. Not escape from thoughts and emotions, but the ability to dance with them instead of being crushed by them. And this freedom starts right now, in this moment. As you listen to these words, you do not have to wait until you understand everything perfectly, or practice for months, or achieve some special state. Right now, you can notice who is listening to these ideas. Who is aware of the thoughts arising in response to what I am saying? That is you, the real you, the you that was there when you were 5 years old, and will be there when you are 95. The you that remains constant while everything else changes. The you that is peaceful, loving, and free. Your mind will immediately try to make this complicated. It will say, but how do I know if I am really the observer? Or just thinking about being the observer? Or, what if I am just fooling myself? Or, this seems too simple to work for someone with my problems. That is just your mind being your mind, trying to stay in control, trying to solve problems that do not need solving, trying to keep you busy with mental projects instead of resting in the simplicity of what you already are. The truth is often simple. Freedom is often a matter of remembering what was always true, rather than learning something new. You do not need to become the observer of your thoughts. You already are the observer of your thoughts. You just need to remember. You do not need to find peace. Peace is what you are when you are not identified with the mental weather. You do not need to create happiness. Happiness is what naturally arises when you are not at war with what is. So here is my invitation to you. And I want you to take this seriously, because it could change your entire existence. For the next 7 days, practice these 3 simple things we have discussed. Use the 3-second pause when you notice your mind spinning. Be the friendly observer of your thoughts instead of their victim or their judge. Remind yourself each morning and evening that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that watches them. Start small. Be gentle with yourself. Remember, you are not trying to fix anything or become someone different. You are simply remembering who you already are. You are coming home to yourself. And watch what happens. Watch how this simple shift changes everything. Watch how peace becomes available in moments you never thought possible. Watch how you become free to choose your response instead of being controlled by your reactions. Watch how life becomes lighter, more spacious, more joyful. But do not just watch, participate. This is not a spectator sport. The understanding I am sharing with you needs to be lived, not just learned. It needs to be experienced, not just believed. Every moment offers you a chance to practice being the observer instead of being lost in the observed. Right now, as I am speaking to you, thoughts are arising in your mind. Perhaps you are thinking, this makes sense, or I am not sure I believe this, or I wonder if this will work for me, or what am I going to do after I finish listening to this, or I should take notes, or my mind is already trying to figure out how to implement this. Perfect. Who is the one noticing those thoughts? Who is aware that thinking is happening? That is you. That is who you really are. Not the thoughts themselves, but the spacious awareness in which they appear and disappear. Not the clouds, but the sky. Not the waves, but the ocean. Not the weather, but the space in which all weather happens. You are so much more vast, so much more peaceful, so much more free than you have been taught to believe. The part of you that worries, that doubts, that struggles, that is real and valid and deserving of compassion. But it is not the whole story. It is not even the main character. You are. The awareness that is listening to these words right now That is your true nature. That is what remains when everything else changes. That is what was there before your first thought, and will be there after your last thought. That is the peace you have been seeking, the love you have been craving, the freedom you have been chasing. It is not somewhere you have to go. It is not something you have to earn. It is what you are. And recognizing this, truly recognizing this, changes everything. Not because your life suddenly becomes perfect, but because you remember that you are not a victim of your life. You are the awareness in which your life is happening. You are not at the mercy of your thoughts and emotions. You are the spacious presence in which thoughts and emotions arise and pass away. This understanding has practical implications for every area of your existence. In your relationships, you become less reactive and more responsive. Instead of being triggered by other people's words or actions, you can pause, observe your mental and emotional reactions, and choose how to respond from a place of clarity rather than unconscious reactivity. In your work, you become more focused and creative. When you are not constantly battling with distracting thoughts, you can direct your attention more effectively. When you are not overwhelmed by emotions, you can think more clearly and make better decisions. In your daily life, you become more present and grateful. When you are not lost in mental stories about how things should be different, you can appreciate what is actually here. When you are not constantly judging your experience, you can simply enjoy being alive. But perhaps most importantly, you develop a different relationship with difficulty and challenge. Instead of seeing problems as evidence that something is wrong with you or your life, you begin to see them as opportunities to practice being the observer. Instead of being overwhelmed by difficult emotions, you learn to be present with them without being consumed by them. I think about all the years I spent trying to fix myself, improve myself, become a better version of myself. I was always working on my weaknesses, trying to think more positive thoughts, attempting to become someone different than who I was. It was exhausting and largely ineffective. But this understanding shifted everything. Instead of trying to become someone else, I started removing the obstacles to being who I already was. Instead of trying to think different thoughts, I began to identify less with thinking altogether. Instead of trying to fix my mind, I discovered I was not my mind at all. It is like spending years trying to improve a theatrical performance you do not enjoy, when the real solution is to remember you are not trapped in the theater. You can step outside anytime you want. This freedom is available to you right now. Not tomorrow, not when you have analyzed for years, not when you have read enough books or taken enough courses or done enough therapy. Right now, in this very moment, as you listen to these words, you can step back and notice who is listening, who is aware of these ideas flowing through your mind, who is the one that remains constant while thoughts and feelings come and go. That is you, the real you. And recognizing that you are that awareness, not as a concept or belief, but as a lived reality, is the beginning of true freedom. Here is the one thing I want you to remember above all else. You are the sky, not the weather. Your thoughts are just passing through. They are not you. They are not permanent. And they are not in charge. The moment you realize this, truly realize this in your bones, not just in your head, everything changes. You become free. And that freedom? It is not somewhere you have to go. It is not something you have to earn. It is not dependent on your circumstances being perfect or your thoughts being positive. It is what you are when you stop pretending to be something else. I am not my thoughts. I am the awareness that observes them. In this space, I find peace. If this shifted something for you today, I would love to hear about it. Subscribe for more conversations like this, hit like if it resonated, and share in the comments one thought you are ready to stop believing. I read every comment, and your insights often inspire future discussions. Until next time, remember, you are so much more than what you think.